African nation. As you know, this meeting was called for the purpose of bringing everyone up to date on the state of the attempt or the intent by the United States government to put me in prison for the 50 or more years of struggle that I've led to advance the liberation of African people and colonized peoples everywhere. But before getting into that discussion, I really want to make just a couple of comments. One thing that I want to say is that free Palestine, every square inch from the river to the sea, including the occupied territory currently known as Israel. Free Palestine from the river to the sea. The shameless murder of Palestinian people being conducted by white colonial powers is at the moment the greatest example of white nationalist colonial democracy on display. Secondly, I want to make a declaration that we must all unite to demand the freedom of Leonard Peltier. Free Leonard Peltier. Not another year. All people should make this demand, but especially all African people. We say this not only because his nearly 50-year imprisonment is unjust, but also because Africans and the indigenous of the Americas are locked together by blood and a common destiny. The fact is that when Africans were brought to these shores at gunpoint as colonially enslaved people, the indigenous people were the only friends we had. Our relationship is based on blood and common interests. Just as we were irretrievably and continue to be irretrievably connected to our motherland, Africa, the African Revolution, we are also part of the Revolution of the Americas, to which we were forcibly dispersed from Africa during the construction of the colonial mode of production. American capitalism rests upon the twin pillars of African and indigenous colonialism, on stolen African labor and stolen indigenous land. And the imprisonment of Leonard Peltier is part of the continuous attack on the right of the indigenous people, as much as the attack on the Uhuru 3 is a part of the attack on Africa, and the attack occurring today in Gaza is about the maintaining of the colonial mode of production that has ensnared all the peoples of this earth. So thank you. On September 3rd of this year, the United States government plans to put me on trial for my lifetime work to win the liberation and unification of Africa and African people globally. The trial of me and two other members of the movement that I founded and lead is scheduled for the U.S. federal court in Tampa, Florida. It is a trial that threatens to imprison me for life and to diminish the already challenged constitutional rights of all who are presumed to enjoy citizenship guaranteed by the United States Constitution. While I am obviously the main target of this U.S. government attack, each of us, Penny Hess, Jesse Neville, and I, all face 15-year prison sentences. We are all innocent of the charges leveled against us by the United States government. This address to you is to alert you to the urgency of this moment and to win you, to begin the organizing process to get to Tampa, Florida, the site of the planned September 3rd trial that threatens the limited freedom of everyone during this era of extreme political turbulence. First of all, I want to refresh the memory of everyone who may be familiar with this case that first came to public attention on July 29, 2022, with coordinated violent 5 a.m. pre-dawn military attacks on homes and offices of the African People's Socialist Party and Uhuru movement in St. Petersburg, Florida, and St. Louis, Missouri, our movement's current headquarters. The military assault utilized flashbang stun grenades and military attired, mostly white men armed with assault weapons, mounted with laser targeting devices that were reflected on my chest upon exiting my home in one of the most economically depressed communities in the most economically depressed section of St. Louis. In South St. Louis, home to the majority of the white population, agents attacked our solidarity front of mostly white people and, like in the other targeted areas, use armored vehicles, stun grenades, and battering rams to crash doors and windows and facilitate the theft of communication devices such as cell phones, iPads, and computers. Our Solidarity Front headquarters were invaded, and the home of two other comrades of the Solidarity movement endured a violent attack. White members of our Solidarity Front were also handcuffed and held at gunpoint by US federal agents in a process that lasted for up to 7 hours of searches of homes and offices. At the same time, the US government was attacking our movement, Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida, where they temporarily took our radio station off the air, depriving us of the ability to communicate with our community and to alert the community and others of the attacks that was taking place. The government then looted our headquarters of computers, iPads, financial records, and other materials, including stuff from our archives that houses decades of the history of our party and the struggles of Africa's and colonized peoples within the US and globally. My uninhabited home in St. Petersburg, Florida was also raided and looted by scores of military agents. And Akile Anai, a resident leader of our party, was also detained at gunpoint and her cell phone snatched. The attack on my homes in St. Petersburg and St. Louis was accompanied by a military shutdown of the African neighborhoods there. In at least one instance, African people had to show identification to leave or enter their homes in St. Petersburg, Florida. The entire African neighborhood became a colonially occupied territory. During the occupation of my home and neighborhood, after serious prodding and me being zip-tied and my wife, Onozene Ishatella, handcuffed behind our backs, we were told that the raids would be big news. This is what the agents told us. The raids would be big news in the morning after a US Justice Department indictment was initiated in Tampa, Florida, against a Russian national who was in Russia. My name, I was told, was in the indictment. The attack on my home and our properties, I was informed, was to execute a search warrant, apparently to obtain evidence of our culpability in crimes the Russian national was accused of having committed. So I want to say that in terms of the status of this case, 1 year following the FBI raids of the Uhuru movement and 3 months after the formal indictment of the three of us that we know as the Uhuru Three in July of 2023, our legal team filed a motion for dismissal of the bogus charges against me, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville. A hearing before a magistrate judge for oral arguments around this motion for dismissal was held in September of 2023. On Friday, January 26, 2024, U.S. Magistrate Judge Anthony Porcelli in the Federal District Court of Tampa, Florida, filed an order recommending that District Judge William Jung deny our motion for dismissal of the bogus charges against the three of us. A trial is now set for September 3rd, 2024, in the federal court in Tampa, Florida. The trial is expected to be at least 4 weeks long. You have to be there for this trial. Everyone who can be there needs to be there for this trial. Because at this moment, what we are doing is starting the trial as far as we're concerned with you that the U.S. government and its institutions of repression what has to be put on trial if we are to succeed and if the people are to be victorious in pushing back against this attack on all of us. So we are charged with violations of 2 federal criminal statutes, 1 count of 18 USC 951, acting as illegal agents of a foreign government, and 1 count of 18 USC 371, conspiracy to commit an offense against the United States government. Each of us face up to 15 years in federal prison on these bogus charges. The bogus indictment charge, they allege that I and the Uhuru movement, our 50-year struggle for Black freedom suddenly and irrationally became an instrument of a Russian-led conspiracy to cause dissension and sow discord in the United States. I want to say that this is so obviously ridiculous because dissension and discord has always been here. There wouldn't be an NAACP if there weren't discord in this country. There wouldn't be any of the Black organizations that has existed since we were brought here at gunpoint if there were not already discord and dissension. And we would be crazy if we were not dissenting against what has historically happened to us as Black people. So this whole notion that somehow Russians employed us to speak out against our own oppression is a slap in the face, not only to the Uhuru 3, not only to me, but to Africans here and every place else. So this indictment came 9 months after the violent military-style multi-city FBI raid on 7 homes and offices of our movement on July 29, 2022. The struggle for the dismissal of the bogus charges is not over. It's not over. The Uhuru 3 attorneys have filed an objection, and I think this is important to say, because it is not only we who understand that this is a bogus charge. The government understood it when it first made the charge. One of the reasons it took 9 months for an indictment. One of the reasons that one of the persons who was indicted, Comrade Akilia Nai, has been even removed from the indictment. The fact is they knew when they made the charges it was false, but they brag about a 96 to 97% conviction rate by the FBI and the Justice Department. But they do that because usually what happens is that people simply take a plea deal and just go ahead and confess to something rather than face the wrath of a powerful United States government that's making war against peoples all around the world. How is a small community in St. Louis, Missouri, expected to fight against that power that's moving warships right now in the Red Sea, contending with the peoples who are fighting in Palestine for their freedom and other things like that? So people usually fold, and they don't have to go to trial because it's usually a plea deal. So there was this false assumption that they could come with armored vehicles and stun grenades and armed thugs and terrorize us into making some kind of deal, regardless of the fact that we had committed no offense at all. They were wrong. And they didn't understand us, and they don't understand you. So we say it's not over. Our attorneys filed an objection to this recommendation from the magistrate, which now goes before the district court to make a ruling. Other motions for dismissal are also possible, including a motion for dismissal on the grounds that the prosecutor deliberately misled the grand jury in order to obtain an indictment. And this is important because the thing is so transparent. This attack is so transparent that I think this is their dilemma, that they have this transparent attack on us. And so they even utilize in a court system that already works against the interests of colonized people. They even used a process that where they deliberately misled the grand jury. And you know, to do that is extreme, because as I said in this country, that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. And in this instance, the ham is on the other foot, so to speak. So our attorney is currently pending motion for dismissal, calls for the basely charges to be dismissed on the grounds that they violate the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. In response to this motion, the prosecutors and the magistrate judge argue that the indictment does not violate free speech, because our free speech arises to the level of action. It's not just speech anymore. At the moment they say that we start working for the Russians, it's not speech anymore, it's action. So they liquidate the question of free speech. They attempt to by using this ploy of us being employees of the Russians as a means to assault the free speech rights. And those rights are not our rights. The fact is that the African People's Socialist Party, Black people, did not write the Constitution. We did not write the First Amendment to the Constitution. And the Constitution and the First Amendments were not written for us. So this whole notion that somehow they can make an assault on the free speech rights of Black people, of the Uhuru movement, and not affect other people is a ridiculous assumption, because they will use this attack on us to open the door to assaults on the rights of free speech for everybody else. And that's what they're attempting to do. So they claim also, absurdly, that this persecution is not targeting our movement because of the content of the speech, and that is therefore it is content neutral. So it said it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is that we said. They're not attacking us, they said, because we disagree with the United States war on Ukraine that's threatening the world with nuclear conflagration. They're not attacking us, they said, because we stood up and demanded that the United Nations investigate the United States for violation of the UN Convention in 1948 around the question of genocide as it relates to African people. They're not attacking us, they said, because we had election campaigns in 1917 and 1919 in St. Petersburg, Florida, for mayor and city council there, where we were demanding reparations. They said that's not the reason they're attacking us. They're attacking us because we work for Russia, and the Russians told us to do everything that we're doing now. So this is the logic that they are attempting to employ. But you and I know better, and we will not allow them to be able to do this in the darkness of some courtroom with only a handful of people there to watch. What we used to say a long time ago, that they used to lynch us, they used to hang us in a tree. Now they lynch us legally. There's not going to be a legal lynching here in the darkness. So we're calling on you. You have to take a stance around this question. You will be the determining factor of what happens, if it happens on September 3rd. So our party has a well-documented 50-year history of organizing on the issues of reparations, genocide against African people in opposition to U.S. wars, coups, and regime change operations throughout the world, including opposition to NATO that predates my visit to Moscow in 2015 by more than 4 decades, more than 40 years. And part of what they're saying is that my visit to Moscow in 2015 was the point where I became an employee of Russia. This indictment, this includes travel that I've made in terms of this predating of this trip to Moscow. I've made travels throughout the world to conferences and other things, advancing the struggle of African people, winning whatever support and solidarity we could win with African people, and not support to integrate into America, but for self-determination. Whoever we could win to unite with African people's right. We wrote a pamphlet. I wrote a pamphlet in 1977, laying out a strategy. Perhaps it's the only tactics and strategy that you can find for African liberation any place in the world. So yeah, this is a bogus charge. So, and many people recognize that even if they don't necessarily understand or necessarily unite with our philosophy, they recognize that this case has serious implications. And this is across the political and ideological spectrum. They see it as a landmark precedent-setting case that would test the limits of U.S. government's ability to suppress political speech. The prosecution of the Uhuru 3 would have a chilling effect on free speech. It establishes a dangerous precedent by which this government could charge, will charge anyone at any time for any speech that the government doesn't agree with simply by accusing the speaker of having ties to a foreign government based merely on the fact that the speaker's views may align with the views of a foreign government. They did this to Du Bois. The Soviet Russia was calling for peace. And this was in the context of a heated, so what they call a Cold War and possible nuclear conflagration. And W.E.B. Du Bois was calling for peace. And so they arrested W.E.B. Du Bois and put him on trial for more or less the same charges that they're making against us, not because he was working for the Russians, but because he said the same thing the Russians said, and that for them was evidence that he was an agent of a foreign power. So our lawyer, one of our lawyers, Leonard Goodman, who wrote in one of the court filings, this really, I think, a significant statement that contributes to the point that I'm trying to make here. He says in this statement, in response to what the court and what the prosecutor said, that the indictment itself, this indictment itself, he says, is indisputable proof that this prosecution is not content neutral. The APSP defendants are not merely charged with entering into partnership with a Russian national, they are charged with disseminating Russian propaganda and disinformation. Thus, as the face of the indictment makes clear, the government is prosecuting the APSP defendants because of this disagreement with the content of their speech. And so further, he says, it is hard to imagine a case with facts that more clearly reveal a government motive to restrict expression because of its message, its ideas, its subject matter, or its content. So this was the statement that was made by Leonard Goodman, one of our lawyers. And it makes the point for us that there's a whole fabrication that they have created to justify this assault that's made on us, and they want to call it content neutral. I'm in a place right now in St. Louis, Missouri, you know, but in African communities I've lived in throughout the United States, they have laws that supposedly are content neutral. For example, laws that say is that people should stop, that say that people should stop at a stop sign. And they didn't make that law, they say, for Black people. They made it for everybody. It's content neutral. But the fact is that the police sit there in our communities all the time just for the purpose of stopping Black people who do what they call a moving stop. They do that all the time. In fact, after the Ferguson Rebellion here in St. Louis, the investigation, this is what forces them to investigate and say, oh, Black people are being treated badly. They determined that the whole government of Ferguson, Missouri, was getting most of its income from making traffic stops on Black people. So this notion that sometimes is content neutral is ridiculous. And they're the same ones who make the law are the ones who have the power to enforce the law, to determine who should be enforced, who should be stopped, et cetera. And this is what happened to colonized people all the time. So this concept of content neutral is something that flies in the face of reality. So I want to say that we have just said a long time ago that this persecution of the Uhuru movement, of me and the Uhuru 3, is the canary in the coal mine. It is being used by the United States government to try to open the gates for an escalation of political repression of free speech in this country. For example, since the attack on our movement, in March of 2023, Georgia police arrested 42 people who were involved in Stop Cop City work. They arrested them for domestic terrorism. They used a domestic terrorism law that was amended by the Georgia legislature in 2017 to add a harsher punishment up to 35 years to property crimes that were already illegal simply because of accompanying political expression critical of the government policy. So they enhanced it by 35 years. And this sounds like some of the laws that Biden was responsible for with the omnibus crime bill that added 64 crimes or more to the death penalty, and obviously for the intent of attacking African people here. It's like William Jefferson Clinton, who was at that time a student, more or less, of Biden, who using this law that's content neutral, more or less, came up with the scheme to put 100,000 policemen in the streets of this country, and everybody understood it was for Black people that they did it. And one of the 100,000 police that they put in the streets of this country probably killed Mike Brown right here in Ferguson, and killed other African people who we're still struggling to try to deal with. That's what their content neutral law does, in fact, in the real world. So on September 5th, and this whole notion of free speech, like Africans live with this every day in our communities, and freedom of assembly. When the police comes up to us, constitutional right to free assembly, they said, they come up in our community, they say, get off the corner, give me the corner. You got to move. If you don't get off the corner, you can be clubbed to death, shot. Anything like that happens to us on a regular basis. This is content neutral kind of law that we live with in this country, and we understand what that means in the real world. So on September 5th, the Attorney General of Georgia indicted 61 people who had spoken out against Cop City, alleging violations of the state racketeer influence and corrupt organization law, RICO, over ongoing efforts to halt construction of Cop City, where a whole landmass that's equal to the size of a city being used to create police stations, police entity that was there for the purpose of terrorizing the African population, containing the African population, colonialism. And then what the judge did was impose a gag order to stop Cop City 61, that is the Cop City 61, the 61 people who've been indicted, barring them from being able to speak to the press about their case. They can't even talk to the press about their case. You talk about free speech, and this is something that's happened subsequent to the July 29, 2022 attack on our movement. Indicted activists, including a protest observer, face up to 20 years in prison. 3 bail fund organizers face additional money laundering charges, and 5 people also face state domestic terrorism charges. This is what's happening in this country, and this is subsequent to the attack on our movement. And even we have been having struggles around issues of money to deal with our defense and things like that, where certain institutions have either taken our money and held it at least for months and months without allowing us to have access to it to pay lawyers, or they find themselves now going out of business because we've been successful up to now in raising, with your help, raising the kind of resources we need to pay for our defense, because what they wanted to do, among other things, is to take every penny that we've got so that we will not be able to forward these economic development programs that we're using to transform communities, and especially the community right here in North St. Louis. The Tampa 5 is another case subsequent to the attack on our movement. On March of 2023, 5 women in Tampa, including students and 1 faculty member at the University of South Florida, were arrested for protesting Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' policies dismantling Black studies in public education. They were charged with battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting an officer without violence, and disrupting a school campus or function. And each faced the possibility of a 5 to 10-year prison sentence. Earlier this year, their felony charges were dropped, but they were subject to a so-called misdemeanor diversionary program that banned them from going onto the University of South Florida campus for at least a year. Free speech, democracy. Palestine, in January, just one day after the magistrate's recommendation to deny the Uhuru 3 motion to dismiss our case was publicized, the former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, openly called for the FBI to investigate pro-Palestine protesters for so-called ties to Russia. This is Nancy Pelosi, who, when she was the third most powerful office holder in the United States, was when the Capitol was assaulted by mobs of white people, they who defecated on the floors of the hollowed halls of the Capitol, who took her chair and stuck their feet on their desk and chased the Vice President of the United States through the hall, threatening to hang him. This is Nancy Pelosi, who hadn't come up with anything about asking the FBI to investigate all of these people who are doing these things for connections to Russia. But anybody now who stands on the side of the Palestinian people must be investigated by the FBI. This is what she's calling for. So in late 2023, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution condemning all expressions of anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism. Students for Justice in Palestine. Chapters have been suspended or disbanded at universities across the United States, including Columbia University, on the grounds of promoting anti-Semitism. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has called for all chapters of SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, at universities throughout the state to be disbanded. In Los Angeles, California, 2 Mexican educators affiliated with Unión del Barrio were sued by Zionists for anti-Semitism because of their inclusion of Palestine in their ethnic studies curriculum. In October 2023, Rockland Community College suspended the student Madeline Ward for her pro-Palestinian advocacy, which included shouting from the river to the sea, "Palestine will be free," at a pro-Israeli demonstration on campus. The college subsequently charged Ward with numerous conduct violations, including disrupting the event. Also, in October 2023, Brandeis University banned the campus chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine for, in part, social media posts stating "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." Brandeis University Ron Leibowitz characterized the post as calls for the erasure of the Jewish state and suggested that the phrase should be banned on campuses. This is something to say that somebody calling for freedom. This is what they're calling for: freedom. Palestine will be free. And this is some kind of crime. And this is the thing of our movement. What is called for what? Uhuru. Uhuru means freedom. And that automatically designates us as some kind of problem because we call for freedom. And it is true that any time that the colonized people demand freedom, it is an assault on the whole system of colonialism and jeopardizes the rights of all of the colonizers to oppress us and to steal all our resources, et cetera. So, we can go to various other places, Germany, Muslim organization on November 16, 54 locations across Germany targeting Muslim organizations for expressing support for the Palestinian resistance, and days later raided the homes of 17 people accused of posting anti-Semitic hate speech on social media. Boy. France, England, cities banned pro-Palestinian demonstrations, outlawed even speaking the words "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." And then since October 7th, the state of Israel has arrested at least 100 Palestinians for social media posts supporting the resistance in Gaza. So this is the kind of stuff that's happened subsequent to the attack on us on July 22nd, July 29, 2022. And so we can see the case of the Uhuru 3 is one of incredible significance. The cascading attacks on the presumed constitutional rights of the people are growing in intensity, approaching the point wherein the political repression of growing numbers of people and groups acquire the character of the normal restrictions on the colonized. So you see political repression happening throughout the world and inside the United States, achieving the character that normally is associated with just attacking Black people, Mexicans, and indigenous people, and the colonized people. White people have defined this colonial intrusion on the rights of the colonial citizens as fascism. This thing called fascism can only occur for the colonizer or white citizens because crisis stemming from the resistance of the colonized to the ongoing theft of liberty and resources that enriches the colonizers is accepted by the colonizer citizens as their crisis. As to say, it is the crisis of the colonizer citizens, while the resistance of the colonized to colonialism goes unrecognized as their resistance. So they recognize this crisis that comes about as a consequence of the colonized fighting to take back our resources as their crisis. This is where you see the emergence of what they call fascism. But this can only occur because they don't recognize the resistance of the colonized that causes the crisis that they're looking at as their resistance. It's our resistance that keeps them from being able to benefit from what they've done. So this opportunistic blindness of the colonizer citizen population is used by the colonial government to attack the rights of the colonizer citizens through the success of the colonial state and ruling class in seducing the colonizer citizens into unity with oppression based on racialized exceptionalism. They become the master race. They become the chosen people, or some other self-isolating designation that inures them to the attacks on their rights, because the attacks begin as indirect assaults, the significance of which are made invisible because they are directed at the others. Never mind. We are innocent of the charges made against us, and we are engaged in a furious struggle to expose the crimes of the government in violating the very laws it is sworn to uphold as central to the foundation of what they characterize as the rule of law. And this address to you is calling on you to continue to even escalate your participation in this fight back, to recognize as we do that the struggle against colonialism is one that is being pursued in defense of the Uhuru 3 and all of the colonized people. So we will fight them in the courts. We have had the benefits of an extraordinary team of lawyers, 5 of whom are working directly on the case right now, and another, Life Malcolm, who was the lawyer for Akile Anai until the colonial state decided not to include her as an unindicted co-conspirator. Our lawyers are mounting a joint defense and are furiously battling the colonial state on its own turf. These lawyers include Adi Griffin, Tom Inskeep, Mutaki Akbar, Leonard Goodman, and Angela Rainey. We will fight them politically. On July 8th, nearly 40 organizations joined with the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, and the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa counteroffensive campaign to extend our struggle against colonialism to include the defense of the Uhuru 3. Political solidarity continues to be demonstrated by a diverse array of forces, some of whom are not included in the definition of what is called the left. I cannot name them all here. There's not enough time. And as the list continues to grow, I would certainly inadvertently leave some of them off. However, it is necessary to point out support from forces like constitutional lawyer and award-winning journalist Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson, the former Fox superstar, news superstar, who himself is under fire for his political views and his controversial interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin. I mention these two men as examples of the depth and diversity of those who are fighting with the African People's Socialist Party and Uhuru movement in defense of the free speech rights being snatched away through this attack on our party. Obviously, there is much more to this attack on our party than what the colonial government is stating. Their dilemma is an inability to nakedly declare that the colonized African people of the United States have no rights to constitutional protection. They are attempting to obscure the reality of an 1857 U.S. Supreme Court ruling regarding a case rooted in the history of St. Louis. It was a case known as the Dred Scott case, where formerly enslaved Dred Scott and his wife Harriet sought refuge in St. Louis and were denied such based on the court's decision. This is the Supreme Court, that a Black man had no rights that a white man had to respect. This decision has since been determined to be a case where the law was used as now to carry out a political program. It took a civil war to formally overturn that decision. However, colonial oppression continues to define the relationship that Africans have to the United States. And the case of the Uhuru 3 is glaring evidence of this, despite the constitutional amendments that ostensibly overturned this for the U.S. embarrassing ruling. This for the U.S. embarrassing ruling. This was an embarrassing ruling. Subsequently, it has become an embarrassing ruling, the Dred Scott ruling that says that Black people have no rights that white people have to respect. And the only thing that changed that was a civil war. That's the only way that's got changed, a civil war. It took a war to overturn that Supreme Court ruling. This is why the colonial state is attempting to cloak the attack on my rights to free speech by, one, declaring that I and my comrades are not being attacked because of speech, but because our speech became an act, because it was done in the service of Russia, and by attempting to curtail our legal defense in a courtroom, by restricting our defense to an alleged association with Russia. That is to say, that's the only thing that we can deal with is what they said about Russia. This obscures an attempt to obscure the historical oppression of African people by America and our unending resistance since captivity. There has never been a time where African people have not been resisting captivity. And it would obscure the fact that we are looking at a settler colony when we're looking at the United States, that African people were brought here in chains at gunpoint. It's not like we came here running, looking for a better way of life. The people who came here looking for a better life brought us here in chains, put us in chains, etc. And we've been fighting ever since. But they would obscure that. They don't want the history of this relationship to be talked about in a courtroom. They don't want us to be able to say, this is why we struggle. They want to limit this legal framework of this discussion to the Russians, the Russians, the Russians, the Russians. And as somebody said some time ago, the Russian who they said was supposed to be leading us in this case, leading me as some kind of overseer, wasn't even born at the time where we began this struggle. So we are to be made, by this attempt, we are to be made mute in the court as the stun grenades and colonial forces were intent on doing on July 29th. We have no agency. We were created by the white man who brought us to the shores of this white settler colony in chains. And our crime is that we sought new masters in the form of Russia. This is how they would define this reality. But it is they, the colonizers, who are fearful and frantic. This is the only way to explain the military assault on my home and organization. They are frantic not because of what I say, but because of what will be heard by those to whom I speak. This is why they had to attack the Solidarity Front of our party, because they know that white settlers who have the political, ideological, and organizational capacity to represent the Achilles heels of the system that requires their loyalty to despotism for its survival. If the white people in this country and most of the world would abandon their loyalty to colonial domination of the rest of us, this system couldn't exist, you see. And so we have the evidence, of course, of February 25th, when Aaron Bushnell, a 25-year-old Air Force serviceman, U.S. Air Force serviceman, self-immolated or set himself afire in front of the Washington, D.C. Israeli embassy. And I just want to say, for those people who want to characterize Bushnell's protest as representing some kind of insanity, what it represented in part was you can't talk about these issues. There's no free speech. He doesn't have the freedom of speech. The social media entities, the newspapers, none of them will even tolerate any criticism of this relationship between the United States government and Palestine. So he did this dramatic thing. And so it wasn't because he was crazy, it's because of repression. Because the fact free speech is constantly under assault, and increasingly as the system itself is experiencing crisis, this free speech is under assault. So we say that before setting himself afire, Bushnell declared in words echoing years of declaration by our Solidarity Front to U.S. White settler colonialism. This is almost something that's taken directly from statements and positions that's been put forth by our Solidarity Front for years, 40 years or so. He said, "I will no longer be complicit in genocide." And you can't say genocide, right? Because the Russians are the ones who came up with that, according to the indictment on us. "I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I am about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it is not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." This is really insignificant because he's talking about colonialism. When have you heard any of the white left out there who's even talking about what's happening in Gaza talk about colonialism? They want to liquidate the colonial question because the solution for colonialism and just treating Palestinians badly is different. And so he makes this statement, and he's shouting "Free Palestine" as his last words to the world. Bushnell is further evidence of the significance of our work and why Penny Hess and Jesse Neville signal a new era of struggle where white colonizers now have the ideological, political, and organizational wherewithal to join with the world's oppressed to end the colonial mode of production resting on the foundation of slaves and slave masters, colonized and colonizers, and workers and bosses. So what we're saying is that all of you, everybody, should go to Hands Off Uhuru in terms of dealing with this assault that's being made on the freedom of everybody, using the attack on the African People's Socialist Party Uhuru movement as a means to do that. Defend the Uhuru 3. Defend yourself by defending the Uhuru 3. Go to handsoffuhuru.org. Begin to work to get to Tampa. Learn through handsoffuhuru.org how you can participate in every place throughout this country, as people are already doing and people throughout the world are engaged in dealing with as well. Go there. Join the emergency response team. Sign on to do that. Donate to this case because, as I mentioned earlier, we've spent more than $240,000 already defending ourselves. They destroyed $40,000 worth of equipment, and when they attacked us on July 29th on 2022. Go to Hands Off Uhuru, join this movement, join the struggle to liberate ourselves. So begin the work to get to Tampa, Florida on September 3rd. Deepen the struggle for free speech, free association, free assembly, and free people. Uhuru.
Shine.